Welcome back, everyone. Welcome back to the show. It's your host, Danny Dhaiphong. Welcome to a Valentine's Day special. Cannot think of a more cheery person to be on with than the one, Mark Sleboda, international affairs expert, military analyst, geopolitical analyst. Mark, good to be back with you.
Daddy, thanks for having me. It's always an honor and a pleasure to be on the show.
Yes, it's great to be with you too. One of the longest time friends of the program, also just of my work in general. So it's been great to spend the years down to get all Valentine's schmaltzy with you, Mark. But let's get down to business, shall we? So the Trump administration, of course, has come to the brink of strikes on Iran twice, or at least that's what we've been told, and now it seems like there are further escalations despite these so-called talks that are now going to continue in Vienna. I know that you have been following Trump's recent words. I'm going to show the audience exactly what he said, basically admitting the actual aim of the U.S.'s more aggressive posture over time, what it really is. Here's Donald Trump.
Well, it seems like that would be the best thing that could happen. For 47 years, they've been talking and talking and talking. In the meantime, we've lost a lot of lives while they talk, and legs blown off, arms blown off, faces blown off. It's been going on for a long time, so let's see what happens.
So that was Donald Trump, Mark, and now I want to just put up the latest escalation. So second aircraft carrier, the USS Gerald Ford, which was actually parked in the waters near Venezuela, that is going off to the Middle East. So, Mark, it seems like we are coming back to the brink of a U.S. attack. This would be the third time the United States has threatened this within the last month. Talk about what your assessment is of this overall situation, the dangers, and also I guess for all sides, especially the U.S. side, given that it seems like there's a decision-making quandary going on in the Trump administration around this.
Yeah, as of yesterday, at least, I haven't seen an update on it yet. But the reports I saw yesterday is they were considering also sending, at least considering the order hadn't been given yet, to send the George H.W. Bush carrier group as well. If that and the Gerald Ford joined the Abraham Lincoln, that would be 3 carrier groups in theater. So that would be, a significant increase in offensive potential. But I've said it before. I've been saying it actually since before last June. The U.S. and Israel Achilles heel here is what has repeatedly brought them up to the brink and had them pause, had them hesitate, had them step or at least, if not step back, at least, stop where they were. And this is exactly also what happened in the 12-day war back last June. It's that the U.S. Achilles heel is air and missile defense. They do not have good air and missile defense systems. They are somewhat older systems. They might have been good for their day, right? The 90s, but they don't have the updates. They are not capable of dealing with the whole range of long-range strike threats that Iran, even the Houthis, right, are able to present. Whether we're talking drones, cruise missiles, ballistic missiles, possibly even hypersonic missiles, they're not able to deal with all of these threats. And this is true whether we're talking about the Patriots, whether we're talking about the handful of THAAD, the terminal high altitude air defense system, because the U.S. only has a handful of them. It's also true of Israeli air defense systems. The Iron Dome is a short range thing. It's might be useful against drones, but that's it, right? It's primarily, the Iron Dome is primarily designed to deal with low tech homemade rockets made out of pipes launched out of Gaza. So the Iron Dome is, people toss the name around, but they really don't know what it means, right? We're talking David's arrows, David's sling, what I like to call David's boomerang from its performance last June. But even more than the performance issues is the paucity of interceptors for these air defense systems, because the U.S. production of these is extremely low. It is still extremely low. The U.S. was already facing a shortage of Patriot interceptors back before 2022, back before Russia's intervention in the Ukrainian civil war, simply because Saudi, during their then attempt to invade and install a client regime in Yemen, they were fighting the Houthis. They were going through Patriots like party favors, and not to great effect, it must be said. And this was CNN reports at the time, talking about, first of all, how ineffective the Patriot was, not against Iran, not against Russia, but against the weapons that the Houthis were throwing at them. And that they were already then running short of the PAC-3 interceptors, of the interceptors for the Patriots. And that because of that, a deal was brokered by the U.S., whereas other Arab Gulf countries that used the Patriot were transferring their interceptors to Saudi Arabia with a promissory note that they would get them back someday in the future. That, again, this is not a question, right? This was published, admitted in the Western mainstream media. We're talking back before 2022. We're talking 2019, that era there. Now, fast forward then, of course, to the conflict in Ukraine and the amount of Patriot interceptors and Patriot systems that the West has thrown into the black hole of the Kiev regime in Ukraine, as well as a handful of local European air defense systems like the SAMP-T and the IRIS and so on. And they're all gone. They're all up in smoke. And we see how effective they are now as Russia pummels the Kiev regime's electrical infrastructure, as well as their train infrastructure and their what exists of their military industrial complex on a nightly basis, because it doesn't exist. Russia pummels them with impunity every night. And the Kiev regime started off in 22 with a fairly substantial Soviet legacy, interconnected, integrated, multi-layered air defense system with S-300s, with Buks, with all kinds of short, medium, and long-range systems, buttressed by some Soviet legacy electronic warfare. And they're gone, right? It took Russia quite a amount of time to get through them, probably, the first 2 years of the conflict. And then the West started piecemeal providing their own, much less effective air defense systems. It wasn't part of an integrated or connected multi-layer network. It was pieces thrown here and there because that's what they had. Pieces that, they really in themselves didn't even know how to use. And so in a lot of cases, particularly with the Patriots, we've probably seen Western specialists operating them. And Rubio, the U.S. Secretary of State himself, admitted late last year that it takes a week. They send an air defense system to Ukraine, and in a week it's gone because Russia destroys it, and that has been happening for 2 or 3 years. And this is a Russian victory over NATO, over the United States, because they made it their clear policy and attempt to use their air and missile defense systems to shield their proxy putsch regime in Ukraine, and they failed. And right now, Russia's harrowing campaign against the Kiev regime's electrical infrastructure, right, affecting, of course, not just electricity, but heating and water and plumbing and everything else, everything that defines civilization, right, in terms of public utilities, is now literally on the brink and faltering in Ukraine because of it. And it is because of a failure of air defense. And when it comes to the provision of these interceptors, they were already having that shortage back with Saudi Arabia in Yemen. And that has only increased with the amount they've poured into Ukraine, that they've spent several times now defending Israel in short attacks against Iran, against the Houthis as well, right? And this extends to shipborne air defense missiles like the Standard Missile 3 and 6, right, that are used by Aegis destroyers and the like. The U.S. does not produce enough of these, and they have not been able to ramp up production. Raytheon had hoped by next year to ramp up production of Patriot interceptors to 650 a year. 650. Now, Russia is launching dozens of ballistic missiles and hundreds of drones and a score of other types of cruise missiles and ballistic missiles several times a week, right? Sometimes the last week it's been 7 times. It's been every night. And for a Patriot to have even a chance of bringing down, let's say, a subsonic cruise missile, they usually fire 2 interceptors at least at the target to increase their rate. So every time they fire, they're firing at least 2 missiles, right, in an attempt to hit one. And these missiles, of course, not only are they produced very slowly and not enough of them, but they're far more expensive than offensive missiles. So this is just a reality of the math and finance of air and missile defense, right? Because 1, you're trying to hit a target. 2, you're trying to fire a bullet to hit another bullet out of the air, right? It's difficult. It's harder. Now, Russia's systems are much more effective, but that's in part because of the direction of military focus dating back to the Soviet Union. The US and NATO concentrated on power projection, on strikes, on aircraft carrier groups, on stealth bombers, on offensive capability. The Soviet Union concentrated on defense as an asymmetric response to be able to confront, to be able to stop perceived then NATO offensive superiority. And they focused on air defense and electronic warfare. And that's why Russia today has far more advanced, more substantial air defense and electronic warfare than the US and Europe does. And we've seen that laid bare, not just in Ukraine, but Iran as well. And the US simply does not make enough interceptors. They never, I guess the unipolar moment, right? Those decades of a couple decades of unchallenged of U.S. striding the world with impunity, knocking down really, today the word is global south or developing, but third world countries like Iraq and so forth, Afghanistan, without any real challenge. But in the modern day, the proliferation of missile and drone technology has grown such that even the Houthis, even Iran, right, which is a substantial regional power but is not a great power, has considerable long-range strike get-back capability, and the U.S. does not produce enough interceptors, and its defense systems aren't good enough to deal with the retaliatory long-range strike capability of Iran. I said this before the war last June, and I was surprised when they attacked, because I said, I know they don't have the air defense to deal with Iran's missiles. And sure enough, 12 days in, their decapitation strikes, which they had hoped to win the war quickly, did not have the level of success that they wanted. Within a week, within a few days, Iran had, from this surprise attack, got their shit together, right? So to some degree in terms of air defense and government and so forth. And they began a heavy retaliatory long-range strike campaign with missiles, cruise missiles, ballistic missiles, drones. And they quickly exhausted the air defense, right? The air and missile defense, not just of Israel, but of course the US, the United Kingdom, France, even Saudi Arabia, Jordan, right? Everyone who was helping out, their air defense capacity was exhausted within days. The war had become a long-range strike war of attrition, right? Similar to one facet of the much broader, of course, conflict in Ukraine. They were hitting Israel, right? But I'm sorry, they were hitting Iran. Iran was suffering damage. There's no question about that. Iran's air defense needs a lot of work, right? They got years of working with Russia on that, and they also need counterintelligence help, because actually, I think the Mossad, their infiltration of Iran and their militants and terrorists and mercenaries and whatnot, actually are achieved far more success than their standoff strikes with aircraft out of Iraqi airspace. But Israel was getting pummeled. Their military sites were getting pummeled. Their economic infrastructure was getting pummeled, and they tried to hide and deny and obfuscate. And they had the global satellite commercial mapping companies blurring out areas so no one could tell how much damage was actually being done. And it started to turn in Iran's favor. And they had a substantial stock of missiles, long-range strike yet to fire, and Israel and the U.S. were out of interceptors. Therefore, Trump came in, dropped some bombs on some nuclear sites, almost certainly actually through a prearranged deal with Iran, declared
I thought,
victory.
wait, they're obliterated, though. They're obliterated now.
Yeah, a journalist brought that up to Trump over the weekend, and he made some kind of comment. They're going to bomb the dust those ones were. Some incoherent.
That'll be the least of it. So he said, "That will be the least of it. That'll be the least of it."
Yeah. So that was quite funny. So, but this is a hard geopolitical limit on the U.S. right now, is their ability to defend themselves and their allies against any country or non-state actor, right? You know, if we want to say the Houthis, that are able to have long-range strike retaliatory capability. Venezuela didn't have any, and they were infiltrated, right? Low-hanging fruit. But Iran is not Venezuela. Even the Houthis aren't Venezuela in that category. So that is what caused the war last June to just go away, right? It, of course, was just a bookmark, right? Everyone knew we were going to be coming back to it. And over that year, has the U.S. been able to restock their air defense interceptors and Israel? No, of course not. They only make 650 of them a year, right? That's a couple salvos. And that's for the purposes of the U.S. military, right? Of the Kiev regime in Ukraine, defending Israel, all the other whack-a-moles against the Houthis in Somalia and wherever else they might need them, and all of the European and Gulf states and every other country around the world that is still owed Patriot interceptors. Meanwhile, Patriot interceptors, very quiet. This isn't, there's a myth that the U.S. under Trump isn't providing assistance, military assistance to Ukraine, but it's a myth. It's not true. First of all, you have the Europeans buying stuff now directly, this Pearl program, but all of these long-range contracts that were signed by the Blinken and Sullivan administration before Trump assumed power, they're all still in effect, right? Payments are still being made. Weapons are still being delivered. And so out of those 650, we don't know the numbers, but a certain amount of them are on a monthly basis are still being sent to the Kiev regime in Ukraine, where they quickly go up in smoke, right? Because they're just ineffective, right? We heard from the Western mainstream media even admitting things like even Russia's ballistic missile, with the modifications that it has, the Iskander-M, they don't have a chance of bringing down even the Iskander-M anymore, which Russia is now firing dozens of them at a time in one night, right? That's how high their production capability is. That's to say nothing of the hypersonic systems, of the Kinjal, of the Zircon, of the Oreshnik and other systems. So they have not been able to replenish those stocks. Even 650 wouldn't be enough, right? To wage a long-range strike war against Iran. Their only hope of their, I mean, we know it's not about nuclear. That's a red herring, right? That's an excuse. It's not about protesters. That went away, right? We that CIA Mossad insurgency was quickly put down. Their communications and coordination were shut down, apparently with, at least according to the Wall Street Journal, with Russian electronic warfare technology. And then it also enabled them to track all of these sons of bitches down and deal with them inside Iran. And so that's all gone, right? How much more do you hear about, that excuse being used? Now we're back to the reality. Yeah, Trump, regime change, right? This is really what it's about. And the U.S. demands, right, in talks, which aren't talks, right? Let's be clear. This is mafia threats. You either completely surrender to us, you stop all nuclear enrichment, which you have the right to do under international and treaty law as a signatory to the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty. You, in Iran and every other country that is a signatory to that country, to that treaty, has a right to enrich uranium as part of a civilian nuclear power program, which Iran most certainly has, because Russia, and Bashir at least helped them, build it. And they have to give up all ballistic missiles that have a chance, a range of, and any other systems that have a chance of hitting Israel, the country that has attacked them multiple times in the last few years. So they have to make themselves completely vulnerable militarily as a country. And what was the third one? Nuclear enrichment, ballistic. And they have to
don't support the axis of resistance, right?
Yeah, the Irish Shia group in the middle. You're not allowed to support Shias around the world, right? Only the U.S. is allowed to support proxy groups around the world. You're not, right? That's so. I mean, that is a surrender, right? That is, and the U.S. is that is their apparently hard line. Trump can say whatever he wants about a deal. He was talking about a deal in negotiations last year as a cover for the Israeli surprise attack. And the Iranians are not going to be fooled twice by that. They were stupid for being fooled the first time, to be perfectly honest. But this was the same tactic they used when Trump, during his first administration, Lord Soleimani, the IRGC commander at the time, the Lion, and assassinated him. ISIS's great opponent that defeated ISIS in Iraq, drove ISIS back from the gates of Baghdad, right, with the popular mobilization units, right? They killed that hero, quite frankly, whom the Russians, by the way, very much liked working with in Syria. Just gonna tragedy that. So and the nasty betrayal and trickery and deception that they used to target him and Iraqi generals, whom of the popular mobilization units, who they killed at the same time. Several high-ranking Iraqi generals. But this is their tactics, right? The talks don't mean anything, right? They're for continuing the buildup of forces, assessments, and ultimately what they're looking for here, as Trump made clear, it's been reported on the way to press, Trump is looking for a quick win, right? He doesn't want that long-range strike war of attrition that they know they can't handle. So they need another quick decapitation strike, right? The one in June of 2025 failed. This recent CIA Mossad insurgency failed. It was stamped out very quickly. So what do they have? I mean, they might conceivably have some more cards up their sleeves. The CIA, Mossad, I mean, they've always got something. But if it was substantial, I think they already would have blown their load, to be perfectly honest, right? In these previous attacks. So that's why they're hesitating. That's why they're bringing in a second, possibly a third carrier group. They're trying to give themselves options. They're hoping that bluff and bluster will, I mean, and there's just no room for Iran to agree to the U.S. demands, at least as they are. Now, if the U.S. does decide, if Trump doesn't want to be dragged into his own national security strategy and national defense strategy very specifically says the U.S. gets the hell out of the Middle East, hands it off to Israel, and supposedly Arab countries aligned with it, with the Abraham Accords, which is a fantasy. But anyway, and the U.S. gets out of there and concentrates on beating up on the Western Hemisphere, and then eventually pivoting to China. But like every U.S. president since Obama, he's been dragged back and back and back to the Middle East. Why? Because Israel's not capable of dealing with Iran on their own.
Right.
So, and we're back to square one. If they don't have a decapitation strike that can take out all of the Iranian military and political leadership, or some miraculous seed campaign where they can take out all of Iran's mobile missile launchers across the country, which is frankly impossible, then they're back to square one where they ended up in June of last year. And this is why they're stopping. This is why they're hesitating. And it is this air defense and air and missile defense hard geopolitical limit on U.S. power at this point. And we heard, it was a few weeks ago, a lot of people I don't think they picked up on this in the alt media. You remember when Trump posted in 1 week, he posted 2 social media posts screaming first at the military industrial complex and then specifically at Raytheon in another one, demanding that they produce more, demanding that, that they magic. He did not specifically say air defense interceptors, right? That's precisely what he was infuriated by, the fact that the U.S. wasn't able, the U.S. military industrial complex, which a lot of money pours into, weren't able to provide what the U.S. needed to have the freedom of action that Trump wanted in Iran and elsewhere, in Ukraine and elsewhere. And he can scream and whine and threaten on social media all he wants, but Raytheon has not been able to ramp up production. They were quite clear about it. They need tens of billions of dollars investment. They also, by the way, need a lot of rare earth and critical minerals.
Raw earths, those raw, yeah.
That for the interceptors, as well as for a lot of, I don't know, I've heard lots of things about F-35s being fitted out in place of radars with Jim Locker ballast weights and so forth, because they're not able to produce the radars in number now and everything, because China is still restricting supplies of several critical metals, minerals, some of which are rare earths, some of them gallium, and others which are not, but they're all needed for the Pentagon's high-tech weapons. And yes, that includes the Patriot interceptor. So that I think is another constraint on Raytheon's ability to ramp up production. But Trump was obviously furious at the U.S. military industrial complex. And that is precisely why, because it is limiting his range of options. He wants to regime change Iran, and the Pentagon's telling him, we can't really do that. we can't do it quick and dirty. We don't have the ability to do that. And if it gets anything more than quick and dirty, Israel's going to take a beating. The price of gas is going to go through the sky. They're going to flood the Strait of Hormuz with sea mines. And then we got midterm elections and gas prices at the pump going up. This is all, I think he forgets. I'm sure that he's told these things repeatedly, and then he has to be retold them because, 15-minute memory and the last person who spoke to him and all of that with Trump, which even his own administration people have had, people in his own administrations have admitted is a characteristic of his way of governing. Is that
reign?
His
reign.
That is a ridiculous overstatement.
Right.
Clusterfuck that is
governance
his
style,
rule in the U.S. But this is the hard limitation that keeps smacking them in the face. It's smacking them face in the Ukraine. They can't stop Russia. They can't stop Russia's long range. They can't stop them on the contact line. But they also, I think, even more importantly now, they can't stop this long range strike war of attrition, where Russia is taking apart the Ukrainian state in its ability to support a population and a military industrial complex and a military on a nightly basis, and NATO can't do jack all about it. It's the same thing in when dealing with Iran, and we don't know the details, right? None of it has been confirmed, but I'm sure your Telegram feed has been as full of mine with all kinds of unconfirmed reports about Russian and Chinese assistance, right? Yeah. Flights coming from Moscow and Beijing and even Belarus, right? Cargo planes coming. Reports that the Russian Tarada 2S electronic warfare system has been provided. Other things. We don't know. I don't. Anti-ship missiles, some air defense systems, right? It's going to take Russia years to build a powerful air defense and electronic warfare network in Iran, train up the people to use it, to build it up, to attach it to radars and satellites and everything like they have. But anything they had in the last year, right? Anything they've gotten has doubtless, their ability has been improved. And I don't think there's any question that both Russia and China are providing, satellite intelligence data, C4 ISR, at a scale that they certainly weren't last June, right? And that alone, people really don't understand, I think, how significant that is. Chinese, even commercial satellite companies have been publicly posting.
That's what I've been covering. It's incredible. I'll pull it up later.
Bases in the Gulf showing right where those air defense systems and other critical things are, and enabling. And I'm sure that that's the commercial stuff. I'm quite sure that, of course, they're getting the good military grade stuff as well, and that will provide a great deal of assistance in Iran in targeting any retaliatory strikes. That's why the hesitation. That's what's going on, and they're looking for options. They're scrambling, right? It's like what happened in Venezuela, I think, right? They assembled a big military force, and they're like, all right, what do we do? The options aren't necessarily great. And Venezuela, ultimately, it wasn't really a military operation. It was a CIA operation. And that's what gave them the success, such as it, as we're able to tell there anyway. I know that's contentious. A lot of people who don't want to believe what happened.
Yeah, I think it's we can see what we see. It's it certainly has had an influence. There's no doubt there's been an effect.
When I see Delcy Rodriguez feting Daniel Ratcliffe, the director of the CIA, and the U.S. Energy Secretary, greeting them with kids playing indigenous musical instruments and giving them smiling tours and photo ops, and the reports, at least in Bloomberg, the Rodriguez denies it, but of Venezuelan oil being delivered to Israel. Sorry, I know a lot of people don't want to believe it, but you know what happened. We all know what happened. I said it at the time. A few other people did, and said before what was going to happen. But anyway, that's Venezuela was Venezuela. Iran is a very different beast, right? Very much for their benefit, very much geographically further away from the United States as well, which is a big help as well. That definitely does matter. So I mean that's where we are, and we're still waiting on the U.S. to if they're still talking regime change, obviously they're not willing to back down. How we'll know that they back down is if they fall back on some type of nuclear arrangement, some type of JCPOA 2.0, some type of nuclear enrichment consortium or involvement of Russia, right? We'll know that the Trump administration has backed down, right? They've looked at their options. They're said they're not good. Trump is like, all right, screw this, Bibi, you're on your own. All right, I just, not going to deal with that. I don't see that right now. Right, I don't see that at all. That is how we'll know that the U.S. Backed down, but we're not seeing that, and I think it's still not likely to happen with Trump still going off, like he is. He is. I think. Remember when Trump said recently the only limit on him
is his
not
the UN. It's his own morals. It's what he wants.
His own non-existent sense of morality. Well, that's not true. There's a real hard limit, right? First of all, there's Russia and China. We want with military on one side, economics on the other. Rare earth, a whole lithium batteries, a whole host of limitations there. But here, another hard limit to Trump's power: air and missile defense, and Iran's retaliatory long-range strike capability. And he's furious about it. He's angry, and I mean, when you believe that you're the God Emperor of mankind, then I guess being brought painfully to reality with hard limitations on your power like that can be frustrating. Totally. I mean, you gotta have some sympathy for. Okay, no, you don't. I don't have any.
Yeah, we gotta shed tears on. We gotta shed tears on this day of love, Mark. Yeah, no, I mean everything that you're saying I think is really important, and I'm glad you brought up this factor of we have both the material limitations that the United States has. It believes it's the God Emperor of the world, the God Empire of the world. Trump is the God Emperor sitting at the helm, but then you actually have the reality in front, which is the United States cannot stop what Iran can do, and that makes, I think, Mark, and I wanted to just show some of these reports that you reference regarding even just some of the cooperation that we are seeing be talked about all across social media and even Western mainstream media between Russia, China, and Iran, assisting Iran. And let me just pull some of this up because I think it's instructive to show that I think any level, it's a great point you made there, any level of support that Iran gets in the interim, all this time of the U.S. talking, we're getting ready, all this time since the 12-day war, I think any level of support really does matter. I don't know if you saw, you're talking about the transporting of all this cargo, Russia, China, Belarus, all coming in constantly. I mean, this has been a months-long development where nobody really knows what's coming in because they're not announcing it, but many believe that it's likely some level of military support. I don't know if you saw this, Mark.
I want to believe.
Yeah. I don't know if you saw this, Mark. Now, this doesn't have military purposes, although a lot of people are telling me in my ear that a satellite like this that is as advanced as it is, that Iran got Russian assistance to launch the Jammy Jam satellite that helps vastly improve its broadcasting capabilities. It just launched this incredible, innovative development. People are saying this could have military
that's publicly announced. What did they also launch that they're not publicly admitting to? Right?
Exactly.
States don't admit when they're launching secret military satellites. They don't do that, right?
Nope. And then here is some of the military support, however significant it may be or not. Iran has received brand new helicopters from Russia, the Mi-28.
Okay, that's a long-term contract deal, and of course they have very limited utility in a conflict with the United States.
Right.
But Mi-28
Right.
still, I mean, for its own purposes, if they're dealing with Baluchi separatists or the Mujahideen calc launched on them or something like that, then yeah, those could be useful.
Right. And then, of course, Foreign Policy magazine has been lamenting about Russia supporting Iran's ability to internally maintain stability, including provide military technology, internet technology, those electronic warfare capabilities. They all cited as being a part and parcel of how Iran was able to get control of the situation when those horrifically violent riots. You brought it up, Mark. 3,000 plus people were killed in that. That was at the hands of the United States and Israel, even so much so that it's been admitted that the U.S. sent
U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bennett openly admitting that it was, the whole chain was set in motion with U.S. financial attacks, right, to provide a shortage of the dollar, and thus an attack on the Iranian rial, causing its value to plummet, generating the protests, which were then used as a cover for the insurgency. The whole thing. I mean, they're very good at that. I mean, they're very good at that. You give them the slightest opening in your country, right? We've had reports that I saw recently that the Starlink terminals were smuggled into Iran in a very short amount of. I actually don't believe that. I think they've probably been smuggling them in for a year. I have to say I don't actually believe those reports. But everything was engineered, right? That was a color revolution, or I mean maybe a little bit harder than a Mossad insurgency attempt, and it was engineered. It was well engineered, but they always make this mistake. They make the same mistake with Russia, with China. They're unable to put themselves in the minds of Iranians and Russians and Chinese, and their experts are ideological driven anti-Russian, anti-Chinese, anti-Iranian ideologues who all tell them that, no one supports their governments, that they're a house of cards, that they're all going to fall over, there's no real support. And therefore they continue to launch these harebrained military hybrid warfare attacks, because that's what they are, expecting greater results than they get. The same thing with the economic war on Russia with sanctions. They underestimate the opponent. They underestimate the strength, the resiliency, the support of the population. Yeah, okay. In Venezuela, they did an end run around it because it was obviously some type of CIA top-down coup, right, that occurred. I don't think most of the Venezuelan people still even understand what happened in their country, right? But that's not going to work in Iran. It did work in Ukraine, it must be said. Maidan, is a classic example. But Russia and China have strong firewalls against this now, and Iran is they are enduring. They've no question that it works to a degree, right? It puts them under stress, but again and again, they've survived, and they're getting stronger as a society, as a government. Their institutions are getting stronger, I believe, as a lessons learned from these attacks.
Yeah. And I wanted to let me pull this up again, Mark. This is the Chinese satellite technology. So Iran, as they're dealing with, of course, as you were just referencing, their own internal situation and how they handle U.S. sanctions and, of course, U.S. and Israeli proxies, China is offering publicly available, this satellite data. We don't know, as you said, what is privately being given, but this is a Chinese satellite company just literally providing where THAAD launchers are, where U.S. assets are all across the region. It's actually quite stunning when we think about it, Mark, because this has been going on actually for quite some time, for a month, but it's getting much more attention. And I think it just shows that any level of support that Iran can get only bolsters that dynamic that we are seeing, which is the United States has to come up against a country that can hit back. And any level of protection it can provide itself only makes that ability to retaliate that much more difficult to confront. So yeah, your Mark, back to you, your comments.
Yeah, actually, I mean, I know I'm known as kind of a cynic and a black pill and so forth, but if you're looking for, you know, shall we say a cheap moral sense of high, there's a video out there. I posted it in my week in review on my own channel yesterday. RT highlighted it at one point this week. There's an anime video that kind of, according to RT, at least went viral. A Japanese anime showing showing the U.S. and Israel attacking Tehran, and then Iran starts fighting back. Yeah, okay, all right. It's a cartoon. It's take it for what it's worth. But if you're like me and you see the photos of those THAAD sites and everything, you're like, yeah, hit them hard, right? And that anime will satisfy that visceral need, right? For resistance, I think, right? I don't take it as realistic or anything, but there's a degree of truth in it.
Yeah, and I think one thing, Mark, about all of this as we're seeing this build up too, because everyone right now is warning, the New York Times, Russia, I'll pull that up in a bit as you're speaking. They're all warning that this attack could definitely still come, but it's the lack of a surprise factor. The fact that we're constantly talking about the U.S., intervening, waging a so-called weeks-long war. This was not the conversation back in the summertime. It was a surprise. It was a whole operation. That operation, apparently, the one that was supposed to have worked, the so-called protests, the riots, that is dead, essentially, or at least for what we know. And there is no more surprise. And so you even have this dynamic even in the region. Yes, sorry.
Yeah, I mean, they haven't released the Mujahideen calc yet, right?
Right.
The Baluchi separatists. That's why I said they still probably have a few cards. Now, that's not going to be as effective for a decapitation strike, right? That could only be attacks in the fringes and that sort of thing on the ground. That's only if the government, starts to collapse, not be able to fight back. But don't count that they have nothing left. Because I don't ever underestimate the CIA, right?
It's what they're investing in. It's where the real investment goes.
Right? Yeah, you're free to critique and deal, shall we say, critically with the U.S. military, right? As a U.S. military vet myself, I certainly feel entitled to do so. But I am much more hesitant. I never ever underestimate the ability of the CIA and Mossad. Never.
Yeah. Well, there's certainly there could be something up their sleeve, but how much of a surprise it will be, how much of a surprise factor they will get, it will be another question. And you even have, I think the situation is, there is all this talk about, okay, where the U.S. might attack. There's also a little bit of desperation setting in, and I think no better person to show what that desperation looks like than Lindsey Graham. So Lindsey Graham right now is trying to lobby so hard for the region to get on board, which of course was not the dynamic last time around because of the surprise attack. All the countries, Jordan, Saudi Arabia, they all essentially lent their hand to the operation. Now they're talking a bit of a different game, but still makes a difference at the public, at least in terms of public relations. Here's Lindsey Graham and his choice words for Saudi Arabia on this Iran question.
I'm going to tell anybody that will listen in the Mideast, don't let this moment pass. Be smart, but don't be locked down with fear. And as to MBS and MBZ, knock it off, Saudi Arabia. Knock it off. I'm tired of this crap. MBZ is not a Zionist. and you're emboldening Iran by having this conflict. Now, I know they got differences in Yemen and they got differences in Sudan, but we got to think big picture. To any leader in the region that doesn't understand you're on the verge of history, history will judge you poorly because you are.
I mean, it just, I mean, of course, there's been some, I guess, smaller story, internal, regional issues between Saudi Arabia and the UAE. But I think the crux of the matter is that those countries have to publicly right now, for the sake
vassals
of
aren't in line.
They have to be. They're scared. I mean, they are afraid because Iran doesn't even have to use their most advanced missiles to hit them.
It's not just the missiles, right? I mean, it's in their own self-interest. They're like, why do we want to plunge the region into economic war? Why we don't want to risk the closing of the Hormuz Straits, right? We're happy. Right, Saudi Arabia is very happy with OPEC Plus, with working with Russia. Right, they don't like the U.S. continually trying to dictate global energy markets and who can sell to who, and now threatening. You know, they are disrupting things by taking over Venezuela's energy. Right, and Saudi Arabia doesn't like that. They feel very threatened, as they should, by all of that. And they're like, we don't need this right now. I was extremely critical, even contemptuous and hateful towards Mohammed bin Salman, when he first
Mark, we seem to have a connection issue right now. I don't know if you can hear me.
I can hear you.
Yeah, there's the camera lag. You're breaking up a bit. I don't know.
Okay.
Oh,
can you hear me now?
Yeah, I can hear you now. Yeah.
Okay, so Mohammed bin Salman has matured. Whether him, his administration, whatever, as a statesman, he's grown up a bit. I think, right? They reached out with the Iranians, right? Yes, with Chinese and Oman and other help, right? But they did a lot to normalize. I mean, okay, not normalize, but made steps towards normalization of relations with Iran. He understands, I think, that not everything calls for a military solution, right? He's learned that in Syria and elsewhere now, and he's like, we just don't need this. It's harebrained to begin with, right? We fought the Houthis for years, and not to great end game or results there. We don't want to get back into this type of war against the Shia world, right? That you're trying to push us into, on behalf of Israel, and Saudi is balking, and they're not the only ones, right? Hats off to them for becoming more mature, multi-vector, foreign policy statesmen. They're not doing this because they believe in a multipolar world or the axis of resistance or anything like that. They're doing out of a realistic, grown-up assessment of their own national interests. And right now, another harebrained U.S.-Israeli attempt at regime change in Iran is not in their economic or regional interests.
And how much of this, Mark, I said back in 2023 when it happened that it was going to make a difference in some respects, which was the normalization brokered in Beijing between Saudi Arabia and Iran, that while of course Saudi Arabia does not have a trustworthy record when it comes to what happens in the region regarding how the U.S. Throws itself around there, but at the same time, what we've seen over the last few years is that normalization has made a difference, and I think it was going to be the first country that came out a month, back in January, and said, absolutely not. We will not use our airspace or any of the assets in the country to launch a strike, which is strong words. And you could say just words, Danny. But at the same time, words do matter when they come out ahead of something that, is, is still not yet determined, and it can sway things, at least in terms of how people see it. So I think it made a difference.
I agree it did. I think it was underestimated at the time. And I'm not saying like Saudi Arabia. I'm not saying trust Saudi Arabia, but any improvement, and there has been substantial, like I said, I think simply they've been a bit of maturing, and yes, they're still operating from a sense of their national interests, as any country is, right? And that's not always going to align with ours, and people who are ideological, multipolar worldists or axis of resistance or somewhere. I understand that the leaders of these countries are not operating from your geopolitical ideological narrative, right? Which on a personal level I share, right out there. But on a realist level, where I try to, and you and many others try to understand the action of states, they're not operating from your headspace. They're operating from their conception of their own state's national interests. And I think that Saudi Arabia, among others in the region, has developed a more nuanced, more mature understanding of their national interests and their foreign policy as a result.
Yeah, the fact you have Lindsey Graham coming out and saying, "Oh, NBC is not Zionist." I mean, it just shows how sensitive any kind of change in orientation is, even if it is. It definitely is. Saudi Arabia wants to develop itself, wants to make more money. The only way you make more money is to become more advanced economically, is to build up your ability to develop, and that's what Made in Saudi, whatever it is, 2020, whatever. That's what it is. That's the project. And it has all this energy it can do it with. To bank it all in the United States was always a very, very, very unfortunate decision, likely made by the CIA back decades ago. But now
Lindsey Graham, his shrill hysteria is always a sort of discordant music in my ears when I see him like that. At the same time he's saying this, he was also in Munich, by the way, over the weekend, saying the quiet part out loud that me and many others who have been on your show, have talked about, that the Europeans need to send tripwire. He used the word tripwire, right? Again, how I started talking about this back in 2022, that's where it's going to end up. They know that Europeans don't have the strength to fight the Russians, but just send some troops as sacrifices, as a tripwire, to draw the Americans directly into the conflict in Ukraine. He, again, the same level of hysteria and desperation that we're seeing there with his neocon fantasies, slipping out of his evil, twisted little claws there. And the same thing, of course, happening in Ukraine there, and this must really be a painful neocon blue balls moment for him, right? So close, Trump in office, so close to real war, real on Iran, and now they're hesitating at the brink. It's like, no,
yeah, it really is. That's exactly it.
I really see him as some kind of twisted, a worm tongue creature from Tolkien or something like that.
Totally.
That's the way I conceive him in my head, anyway.
Yeah, no, I mean, I am a total believer in theatrics, in how everything that the U.S. establishment does usually leads to the same conclusion. But when we see, there are also certain things that just aren't scripted, and I think Lindsey Graham's cheerleading for, of course, Israel and all of the donors and all of that. He's such an MIC guy. He is the epitome of what the establishment is in the United States political class, arch neocon. When you see him acting the way he is,
he says the quiet part out loud.
Exactly. You should believe that he is actually worried that the U.S. is on this line right now with Iran, and it could waver either way, because there are major issues. And Mark, I don't know if you saw this at Munich. We're going to get into some of the ridiculousness of what happened there to a degree, but especially with our champion of progressivism, AOC. But I wanted to first show you this. I know you saw what the meeting between the crown prince of Iran, supposedly, uh, Reza Pahlavi, and Zelensky. They met. But what I always find so interesting, Mark, when now that Iran's capabilities are being discussed, there's actually more discussion of Iran's, especially its drone assistance to Russia. And I know you've talked about this in the past as being a character different from how the U.S. and the West frame it. But I always find it so interesting that as much as the United States and the West want to paint Iran as how many times do they say it? On the brink of collapse. It's a weak government. Nobody wants it. It's not. It got hit hard. Everything was obliterated. You saw what happened during June. They still can't stop with fear mongering about how Iran is providing assistance to Russia, how Iran has military capabilities that it provides aid to others around. What's your reaction to this entire development? I feel like it was one of the clown shows that happened at the Munich Security Conference, but at the same time, I think it demonstrates this reality that there's some contradictions with how Iran is being framed here in the buildup toward this war.
Yeah, it really was a clown show at Munich, as you pointed out. I think even a kind of a circus maximus, even if we want to use those terms, where it's all about blood, right? Now they're just crying for a war. They're crying for war in Iran. They're crying for war against Russia. But of course, it's all theater, because at the same time, their own war games are coming out. We had multiple reports this week of NATO war games that show just how dated and how ineffective European militaries are. So all of this baying, we use the word neocon, hegemonist, maybe whatever you want to use, but they were baying for blood over Iran, over Russia, over Ukraine. But it's the Russian proverb about the dog barking in the night and the convoy passes on, because a great deal of it is just this empty, frothing, rabid rhetoric, and they just don't have, the Europeans alone that don't have the strength to back it up, and that's what we saw. And by the way, Pahlavi met this week with Zelensky. A couple weeks ago, he was meeting with Machado, with this crazy Venezuelan woman that even the Trump administration is thrown by the bus now that they've got a much more competent Quisling and Delcy Rodriguez under their aegis. They just threw her under the curb, but that was amusing to see. I said, Pahlavi, Tihanovskaya, Juan Guaido, Machado, they should all get an apartment together in Brooklyn where they can pretend to be the rulers of country together, and then we could vote them out of the apartment, on a weekly basis, do a reality show, a U.S. shadow government Brooklyn apartment building, and that I would watch that. I would watch that religiously if such a thing came about. But Munich was a farce. I mean, to me, the highlight was Mark Rutte, the NATO Secretary General, whom has kind of become the Trump whisperer for the European ruling elite, right? Speaking to Trump with his daddy and his sycophancy and everything, because he has no shame, no dignity whatsoever. I mean, he is a total prostitute. Now we see that he has obviously been tutoring under Cesar Milano, and has become a dog whisperer as well, because we saw him in Munich, and he said there that he spoke to a dog in Ukraine, a terrier. Russell Terrier, Jack Russell Terrier, some ridiculous little thing, and that is does some bomb sniffing or something. I don't know what bomb sniffing they have to do, because it's the Kiev regime that is actually planting terrorist bombs everywhere, but
Yeah, yeah.
not the
Seriously.
recipient of them. But anyway, and he says he spoke to this dog, Patron, and that this dog told him, "We will never give up." I mean, where do they get this stuff from? It's just, it's embarrassing. It's embarrassing. I mean, my Google AI could write better scripts than this, much better scripts than this.
Yeah.
It was a farce, and it was largely bluster again.
Right.
And to me, it was the juxtaposition that at the same time, this Munich Circus Maximus is going on, and they're baying about Russia, war on Russia, and the Europeans need to prepare for war. And at the same time, we're getting the reports from their war games about how a small unit, I don't know, the story was a little disjointed, but at one point they said it was 10 Ukrainian drone operators. At another point they said it was a unit of 100. Whatever. This was in the Wall Street Journal, reporting on NATO war games, that they stopped 2 NATO battalions and wrecked dozens of military vehicles. And why? Well, because they've been fighting the real war in Ukraine. And we hear all kinds of nonsense from, like the NAFO crowd and their own propagandists about, Russia's incompetent, that they're I don't know, they're eating pigeons and they're moving at a snail's pace and so forth. And we see that the side that is losing this conflict kicks NATO's own ass across the field, embarrassingly so, in war games. Shows how far behind modern warfare that is evolving in Ukraine. It's the same. There's a coin, a term coined for it, not by me, but Russophrenia, where simultaneously Russia is both weak, about to fall apart, corrupt, incompetent, not capable of doing anything. At the same time, they're going to take over the world next week, and we need to drastically increase military spending to stop them. So forth. It's the same thing with Iran. Maybe we ought to coin Iranophrenia, right? Simultaneously, the Iranian government is about to collapse, and they have no support from the people, and yet all of their regime change attempts fail, and they worry that Iran is about to take over the Middle East. It's really kind of bog standard othering and propaganda, really. And the really sad thing about it is, I believe that a lot of the Western, particularly the European, but also, figures like Lindsey Graham and within the American political elite, they believe all of these contradictory things at the same time. They have no self-reflective or critical capabilities at all. They literally drink their own Kool-Aid piss. That's where they are.
Yeah. Well, speaking of this, Mark, I think we can spend the last segment breaking down some of these the myths and the realities of all of this kind of how this is being talked about, these developments, especially regarding the rise of what are the 3 big players now in the multipolar world. Russia and China is the biggest, and then of course Iran as being maybe the biggest thorn in the way of the continued march to a fantastical delusional victory against Russia and China. I want to play AOC. So AOC was at the Munich Security Conference. She's not really a foreign policy partisan. She's not a connoisseur in this kind of thing. She is known, though, as you know, Mark, as the most progressive part of the establishment. But she often these days sounds very similar to Lindsey Graham. And she was at the Munich Security Conference, gave these words, and then I'm just going to show a bit of the reality of what she is saying that is not coming through her words. First, though, AOC.
Any second follow-up, really just quick. Are there any particular institutions that a democratic administration would want to save? Like your voters, is it NATO? Is it the climate accord? Is it the Iran nuclear? Are there some things where, just give me a lily pad?
Well, first and foremost, I think we need to revisit our commitments to international aid. Not just USAID, but the dozens of global compacts that this current Secretary of State and President Trump have withdrawn from. They are looking to withdraw the United States from the entire world so that we can turn into an age of authoritarians that can carve out the world where Donald Trump can command the Western Hemisphere and Latin America as his personal sandbox, where Putin can saber rattle around Europe and try to bully around our own allies there, and for essentially authoritarians to have their own geographic domains. And it actually is the Trans-Pacific Partnership. It is our global alliances that can be a hard stop against authoritarian consolidation of power, particularly in the installation of regional puppet governments.
I don't know if you noticed, Mark, at the end there, the very last word she said, she seems so satisfied that she remembered what she was supposed to say. Like, when somebody's like, I had it in my head. I had memorized this. I was going to be asked questions about this kind of thing. And I did it. I said exactly what I wanted to say, sort of, maybe, but I did enough. So I feel good. But Mark, I mean, this is the narrative we just hear from everyone, even from so-called progressives in the U.S. establishment. It's spheres of influence, Putin and Russia, they're bullying Europe. And then she didn't mention it, but she was meaning a Trans-Pacific Partnership. She's talking about China. I hadn't heard those words in a really long time either. Trans-Pacific Partnership. Very interesting.
I was like, wow, that's a blast from the past.
Yeah, but it's all about China, right? And then of course
somebody called and gave me the mid-2000s back. Right?
Yes. Exactly. But, what she's not mentioning at all is that it's the fact that the U.S. is exactly not doing what she's claiming, which is causing these countries to not build spheres of influence, but to get closer together. So this is Ukrainian Media United 24. They talk about the deep connections that Russia and Iran are making. It's not only militarily, and I believe maybe military is even smaller than the financial part of it, being able to make transactions in your own currencies, being able to build a deeper relationship economically independent of the United States. And of course, we're talking about spheres of influence. They're always talking about Africa. And the big news is that China is now getting rid of import restrictions, tariffs on all 53 African countries. The United
U.S.
States
is raising tariffs.
Exactly. And as the United States, so this is the spheres of influence. This is they're instituting regional puppet governments. It seems like actually Russia and China are just, in Iran to a large extent, working better together and working better with a lot of the world. Just look at how China overthrow all spheres of influence in Africa, just to bully around African countries, so it became the #1 trading partner of all of them. This is the reality of. I want you, if you could explain, Mark, the truth of the matter. That is, I think this is the narrative coming out of Munich the whole time. It's Russia, China. They had hundreds of people outside of the conference protesting in support of Pahlavi. This is the kind of clown show we're seeing. But if you wanted to just talk about what the reality is actually, that AOC is desperately trying to skirt in her, attempt to be part of the establishment.
Yeah, I mean, this is the standard hegemonic propaganda rhetoric of the Biden administration era, right? This framing of it as some type of moralistic, as if they have any moral high ground, as if that's risable. Anyway, it's some kind of democracies versus authoritarian powers. That's the way they try to frame it, right? It's part of this this supremacist messianic ideology of exceptionalism, where they truly believe that they are structurally, societally, and above all, morally superior, right? And that allows them to do whatever they want in their fight against to maintain hegemony. And that's the key there, though, and I do agree that actually that Trump is a blip. And I think that the next U.S. president, where as long as it's not J.D. Vance, and even then to a degree, but if it was a neocon like Marco Rubio, or a Democratic neocon or humanitarian imperialist back to a Blinken-Sullivan foreign policy, that the U.S. will go back to treating its vassals, what it calls allies, but its vassals and client states, at least rhetorically, and with a shall we say a bit more of a carrot than the stick than the Trump administration does. And I think that is the Trump administration being stupid. They're being crass, right? They don't understand. And it's true that one of the US's biggest advantages in the current global conflict, right? What again, we are in World War III. It is a war for global order. It is being fought in multiple smaller conflicts in different areas, in multiple spheres, militarily, economically, AI, race, technology, all of these different areas. It is being fought now. And one of the biggest advantages that the U.S. has, the U.S.-led Western global hegemony, is the U.S. has lots of allies, quote unquote, right? Lots of vassals and client states that it is able to use in its interests. The other side, not so much. In fact, I mean, we see even last year, Iran was not willing to turn to Russia and China for help. Now they are to a degree more, right? But that's what they're also very afraid of. And we heard that if you remember this earlier, this retired General Kellogg, he specifically pointed out that this is not the 1990s, and that the big hard limitation that the U.S. was having now is that Russia and China and Iran and North Korea and others were starting to cooperate and coordinate with each other. And again, a lot of room is needed there. A lot of development is needed, but that is an obstruction. It is an huge advantage that the U.S. has as their networks. And the previous administration knew better how to treat them. That's the reality. The Trump administration is crass and to a degree within its own camp, authoritarian or I think it more mafia-like, and it expects more obeisance and sycophancy and the subservience from its vassals than
Totally,
shall we say, standard. As for the spheres of influence nonsense, no. The U.S. does not have a realist foreign policy framework. They are not shifting away from the pursuit and maintenance of U.S. hegemony and primacy. They are not. And they actually made this perfectly clear on the White House website, economic advisors talking about Trump's tariffs early last year, that it regarded the U.S. network of military bases around the world and the U.S. Dollar as a reserve currency as expensive global public goods, right? U.S. military is a global public good that the U.S. provides. And the tariffs were the way that the Trump administration was going to fund these, making the rest of the world pay for them, not give them up. They're not giving up hegemony. We are seeing hegemonic retrenchment in the Western Hemisphere, right? The Trump administration, the Western Hemisphere has been neglected for decades. It was put on the way on and they are not happy with that. But it doesn't mean that they're ceding spheres of influence. They still regard the rest of the world as their sphere of influence too. Are they surrendering Ukraine to Russia? No, the Trump administration is ramping up the CIA war of escalation against Russia. They tried to assassinate the Russian leader, right?
Yeah. And did you hear what Sergei Lavrov said? He said, yeah, Donald Trump is continuing. He's continued the sanctions. He's continued to try to
not just the sanctions. The New York Times admitted
everything.
That the targeting of oil refineries, right down to the couplers that in specific refineries, the attacks on civilian shipping, right? The so-called shadow fleet, right? That was directed by the CIA. That is an escalation by the Trump administration. Yeah, they moved it under the covers, but they're doing that. Are they ceding Taiwan to China? Hell no. They're just trying to push the Philippines and the Japanese in front more. That's all. They're not giving up on hegemony. This is not a spheres of influence thing. Right, where what is mine and what is yours is yours. What is mine, the Western Hemisphere is mine, and what is yours is negotiable. Right, that's the reality. Right, it's not a realist spheres of influence thinking. It's just a retrenchment and reorganization of hegemony.
And it's bad for, I mean, if anyone wants a simple, I think for me, how I would frame it too, for a simple guide to why there is no such thing as spheres of influence to the U.S. empire, it's bad for business. Like, if you're going to give a sphere of influence to Russia and to China, they don't operate on the same economic models as the United States. They don't. I mean, they just do not. If China gets its own sphere of influence out in the Pacific, you better believe that the United States, monopolies, the banks and the military industrial, they're not going to be very happy about that. So the world is the sphere of influence for the U.S. empire, and it's not going to give up that just because it writes the script a bit differently.
And China and Russia go about it in different ways. It's not overt military. No. I did a video a couple of months ago on this Chinese built and run port in Peru. Extremely high tech, extremely efficient. It's reorientating trade between South America and Asia. It's an amazing thing, and that's what China does, right? They build infrastructure, ports, electricity, roads. That's what they do. They're so insidious that way. They help grow the countries that they do business with, rather than what the neo-colonialism, the Washington Consensus, all of that nonsense. And I did a video on it a few months ago, and just in the last week, Trump started screaming about this port and how it was Peru surrendering their sovereignty, right, to China, and how dangerous that was, and how Trump wasn't going to allow that. Rather than say Venezuela surrendering their sovereignty to the United States under gun barrel pressure, right? I mean, that's completely different because Western Hemisphere, because U.S., right? China goes about this war of economics in a very different way from the United States. The U.S. is raising tariffs on everyone, and China is cutting them and building ports and infrastructure. And I don't know. That seems to me a much better strategy than the mafia style tactics of the U.S. Certainly under the Trump administration, but really even with the previous administrations, Lincoln, Sullivan, Obama, the differences are more rhetorical than they are policy.
Yeah, well, I wanted to maybe we can end on this, Mark. It might be a significant conversation, but I wanted to end on this this topic of economic warfare. I'll show a few a few clips, and then I wanted to ask you a question about this report from Bloomberg regarding Russia's re-entrance into de-dollarization, which or a re-entrance into re-dollarization, I should say, which seems to have been shot down already by the Central Bank of Russia. But here is first, I wanted to play a few clips on this economic war. First, showing here's Nancy Pelosi amid this Munich. Everyone comes out when something like Munich happens.
Is she still alive?
All the skeletons, barely. All the skeletons,
Undead.
all the zombies of the establishment. They come out for this, especially when they're not in power. That's just they're much more willing to say the stupidest of things. But here is Nancy Pelosi on economic war in Iran, and then I'll play Besant, and we'll see quite an alignment here.
A way to sort of bring about the regime fallen without using American force, I guess, is the question there.
Well, use economic forces.
Yeah.
Use economic forces. There are ways that could cripple their economy, and some of that has been in the works.
It does feel very tenuous, though, the regime there, more than it has in a long time.
I agree with you.
Yeah.
I agree with you. But again, it's not about a threat from war. Hopefully, it's more about just make their economy, weaken their economy, and that weakens the support they do.
I think she wanted to say make their economy scream. I really do think she wanted to say that.
Yeah. I heard the same thing.
Make their economy.
I heard the same thing, right? Who said that? Was that Graham before? I'm trying to remember who said that.
Make their economy scream. Oh gosh. Oh, help us out, chat. Help us out, chat. I mean, I can find this real quick.
Those words
yes, it was an arch neocon who said that.
Graham or McCain?
Was it Kissinger? No. Yeah, I think it was Kissinger. I think it was Kissinger during the directed from Richard Nixon. It was a director Richard Nixon about Chile. So I guess it was Richard Nixon back in the day. So I guess she's a real student of history there if she's here we go.
Because they do have support in the rural areas and the more conservative imams and all the rest of that. Yeah. But we have to make them feel the pain as well.
So pain economically, but
make the people feel pain, collective punishment, right?
But she's a little behind the game.
About Russia there?
Yeah, she's talking about Iran the whole time.
What?
She was talking about Iran. This was
Iran. Okay, all right. Again,
it's hard to keep up.
Yeah, punishing the rural people of Iran, right?
Now Cuba,
for the
holy
U.S.
crap.
to get its geopolitical way. That is obviously the moral high ground, right? I mean,
yep. And here's Besant admitting, and now we're seeing them do the same thing.
But I thought the Iranian people were rising up to overthrow their tyrannical government to begin with. So
yeah, why do you have to? You have to starve
punish
them. You have to starve them to get them to overthrow the government. I guess that's the whole point of sanctions. It's of course we found it's
propaganda comes into its own contradiction.
It's a failed logic. It doesn't ever work like that, but that's how it is. Here's Besant, by the way, admitting to the financial war crimes against Iran.
I recognize that.
Has created a dollar shortage in the country. At a speech at the Economic Club of New York in March, I outlined the strategy. It came to a swift and I would say grand culmination in December when one of the largest banks in Iran went under. There was a run of the bank. The central bank had to print money. The Iranian currency went into free fall, inflation exploded, and hence we have seen the Iranian people out on the street. We will continue monitoring all the partners, all the Iranian partners. The good news, Senator, is that we have seen, and we can see it with our fencing.
So that's, let me just play the beginning one more time.
Done is created a dollar shortage in the country. At a speech at the Economic Club of New York.
So that's what they admit. They created a dollar shortage.
We did this. That's the mea culpa, saying the quiet part out loud. It's those reasons why we sift through the cesspool of Western media and Western government statements, of finding those little gems of truth that shine through the filth.
And to give the Trump administration credit, we've never had so many in one administration. They don't really talk in obfuscation. Oftentimes, how I've viewed it, Mark, is they talk in like whiplash. It's like they go really, really, really hard. The reality hits them, and they try to dial it back to some degree with some kind of I guess political theater, branding, PR, whatever you want to call it. But
they try to claim it's some kind of madman theory kind of thing,
yeah,
where they go to the hill and then they back. I don't think it's so much madman theory. I think it's just madmen. I think it's just madmen. That's it.
Yeah, well, Mark, my last question to you. I don't know if you saw the reports about Russia possibly re-dollarizing, essentially surrendering. This was from Ukrainian intelligence. It was reported in Bloomberg. What do you make of this? I mean, a lot of people were trying to claim it as credible. I'll pull it up as you talk, but there are talks between the U.S. and Russia, and of course, there's those trilateral talks. They don't really seem to be going very far, even on the issues of economic relations. So, to you,
no, it's all just noise. It's all just noise. Lavrov clearly, this is. Let me explain what this is. This is Kirill Dmitriev, whom is not a member of the Russian government, but trying to speak Trump, right? He knows that Trump this is an attempt to manipulate him, is interested in business, right? So as a way of trying to resuscitate, right? Because the negotiation process between Russia and the U.S. over Ukraine is dead. They send Dmitriev as a Trump whisperer to just talk up some business shit, right? See if he bites on that again. That's all that is. There is no reality to any of this whatsoever. Lavrov, the Russian foreign minister, gave multiple interviews this week where he just said the negotiation process is dead. We wouldn't crawl back into bed doing business with the United States if they were the last partner on earth, right? You know, I mean, he was very clear about this. That's all there is to this. This is not real. None of that is real. None of that. There's no truth to any of it. It's just an attempt to speak Trump, right? And not about any of that actually coming into fruition or reality. The very last thing that Russia wants now, that it has successfully decoupled from the West and grown out of the process, is to crawl back into economic bed with them. No, that's not going to happen. There's no return to normal. There's none of that is real. Don't worry about it. And the fact that it's coming from Ukrainian intelligence should tell you that they're trying to highlight it as meaning something. Anyway.
Yeah.
Don't worry about it. Nonsense.
Yeah, and here is the confirmation of this coming directly from the central bank governor, Nabylina Elvira. I'll just read it off as she's talking. As for the potential development of relations with the United States, she says that, wow, this is a very slow translator. We as a central bank are not involved in this matter at the moment. So
because
I mean, there is nothing to be involved with. It would be ridiculous for all these countries. I mean, you know, especially for Russia, which has done by far and away better in this progression, even before Ukraine, but after Ukraine, separating itself or being forced to separate and then separating itself after the fact from the world financial system dominated by the United States. I mean, it's benefited. Why would you go back into a death trap? It's like, but you know, some people, they believe that there's a lot of course, you call yourself a cynic, Mark, but I think there's a nihilism that does kind of exist in the West, especially among even people who follow geopolitics and are not, adherents of U.S. imperial hegemony. They still have mistrust over the leaders. They have deep mistrust over leaders in Russia, China, Iran, anywhere where the United States is, trying to conduct its regime change operations.
You should be cynical and doubtful, right? Right. And what happened in Venezuela is a case in point to that. What happened in Syria late last year is a case in point to that. the corruptive power of money and Western intelligence is significant. There are reasons to be critical, but you have to base everything on facts.
Right.
And where I saw vulnerability in Venezuela, I did not see that degree of vulnerability in Syria. I must say that was a complete surprise on me. But that is not the case in Russia. Even in the early 2000s, there were members of the Russian political elite who would like to integrate with the West. They're not in the Kremlin. They're not in the Russian government now. Those people are all long gone. As the same is true in China, right? That is gone.
Oh, yeah.
It doesn't exist anymore. We live in a different world today than we did 25 years ago in those regards. And I am the first one to call the Russian government in the alt media on its bullshit, I think, when it is bullshitting. That Dmitriev document, by the way, is one of the bullshit. It's to be cynical.
Dmitriev is kind of BS. I just got to say, this guy.
Again, he's a Trump he's another Trump whisperer.
He has a job. He has a particular job.
Yeah. So it's be cynical on this, but from the other angle. That's the way you should properly be cynical on this. At least that's my take.
Yeah, of course. I mean, every time I go to China, people, no matter what their political ideology is, there's a consensus in the country that one thing that all of this aggression has done from the United States to China is it has isolated those forces. Yeah, those forces. And it's happening in Iran. I mean, we're seeing it now slapping us in the face now, right? You have masses, even just ordinary people, everybody is coming together around the government because they don't want to see what's happened to Iraq and Afghanistan and other countries happen to them. And in China, it's like, well, no one's going to support. No one's going to. You have to actually move up in China. You can't just, say you're running for government and have a bunch of money and, be backed by the most, exploitative and, greedy corporations and banks and all of this and expect yourself to win in China. No, you have to move up. You have to prove yourself. Nobody's going to endorse somebody right now. Nobody's going to be happy with someone who is, going along with the American line. Like, that's just not. It's isolated. They're isolated because the aggression.
You hit it right there, Danny. Yeah. I am cynical about democracy. I am cynical about capitalism. I am cynical about communism. The one thing I believe in, Danny, is meritocracy, and China does that. They do.
Oh, yeah.
They execute corrupt people when they find them. That I believe in.
Yeah, that is exactly what happens, and that's going to continue to happen. But Mark, this was a great conversation. We're going to head out together. I want everybody to know that your Boosty account is in the video description, so everyone after the show can click on that, check out your work, support you if they can. I hope that they can. I just want to thank everybody who became a member, who gave a little bit of a chat today. That's great. Super chat, super stickers. We have some comments here. We have a smart audience here. Threat of Chinese Russian technology enough to make the U.S. Israel think twice. It will be significantly riskier for Israel to get air superiority second time around. Lose for the U.S. I think we made those points. Why is Trump entertaining this? Iran is not a threat to the U.S., only Israel. Nixon admitted Israel has zero strategic benefit to the U.S. It's a moral obligation. Translation, they bribed and blackmailed us. I mean, I have
Israel first.
Yeah, exactly. The area of the greatest darkness, greatest mistake at the end of this age, always marked, blah, blah, blah. Okay, great. Thank you. Quote, thank you so much. How compromised is Russia by the Western mafia? That's a question. I guess you can.
Not anymore.
Yeah. Look at Pakistan. Imran Khan visits Putin on day one of SMO. Now Khan is in prison after U.S. started Pakistan vis-a-vis Cyphergate. Anyway, thanks all for the support, everybody. I want to make sure you hit the like button before you go. Mark's Boosty account is in the video description. All the places to support this channel, Patreon, Substack, and much more are also in the video description. Until next time, I'll see you Monday with Mohammed Marandi. He will join us from Iran. All right. Take care. Let's go. All right. Bye-bye.